Before I forget, let me introduce myself. I am Khabora Lebepa. I am the chair of the Johannesburg Regional Committee. I run my own ICT audit and consulting firm, and I also run my own NGO, as well as running my own crypto business. Today, I have two ladies who are going to be speaking to us. One of the things that we have come, and you'll see in our annual report, one of the things that we've got to realize is that, as much as we are professionals, we are also human, and there's a lot that has been happening in the past year as well as currently that made us sit back and say, wait a minute, there's a lot of us that are, in pain or confused. And we need to not just touch on the professional aspect of ourselves, but we also want to touch on the human element. And therefore, today we bring you two speakers. The one speaker will be talking towards the human element because we want to grow holistically, not just on the technical side, but we want to grow as a whole, as a person, and be able to deal with the softer things that come our way that actually contribute a lot to who we are as professionals. So please do pay attention and enjoy the session that we're going to be having with one of our speakers, Tebello. And then we will then go to the more technical stuff with Candice. For those of you who were in attendance in our last forum, Candice also presented on the softer skills. She shared how she managed to balance being a professional, being a mother, being a wife, being a sister, and all that. And we are continuing with that theme today, not the balancing part, but we're looking now at you, the person, as the leader, and also as a professional, how and what you can do to excel in what you are doing. A few house rules. Please, we're gonna keep the mics on mute, and also our cameras will be off except for the speakers. If you have any questions or any comments, please keep them going in the chat box. And lastly, please note that the session is recorded for our CPE points. I really implore you to be alert and to participate. And because also, as you know, we are going to be having a mystery prize. So I'm not going to tell you what that mystery prize is, but all I can tell you is the more you participate, the bigger the chances you have of being the winner. So keep those fingers on your board. Pay attention still, but make sure that you are participating, because we don't just want you to be here virtually on the other end, but we want you to be engaging, and we want you to come out of this session with something that you have learned. If it's one thing, if it's two things, it's 10 things, but we want you to come out of this session better than what you did when you came in. So the winner will be announced at the end when we do our closing. And I have to say that if you are not online, you will not get your prize. So you have to stay on until the end, and we will announce the winner then. So without wasting any time, I'm going to just go through our normal announcement so we know as members what is coming our way. And then I will introduce our speaker. Right, so as we know, June is the biggest month for us. We have our annual virtual conference coming. Unfortunately, once again, we have to do it virtually. But for those of you who attended last year's session, I'm sure you will agree with me that it was a lovely session. And obviously, we've learned a few things from that, so it will even be better than last time. So don't miss out. 7th and 8th of June, that's when our conference will be. Please make sure that you book your seat. There are group discounts that are available. So if there is a few of you that in your organization, you can book as a group and you'll get a discount. With our conference, as we know, we always have the pre-workshop event as well as the post-workshop event. So we will be having an RPA auditing workshop pre the conference. As I'm sure most of you know, with the pandemic, technology has been accelerated immensely, and more and more companies are looking at automating their processes, and they are looking at using robotics to do that. So I'm sure some of you are already doing this in your organizations, and if you are the assurance provider, then you need to know how to tackle auditing the RPAs. So please don't miss this. It will be on the 4th of June before our workshop. And then post the conference, we will have our COVID-19 Foundation workshop, which will be hosted by Tish. So please don't miss this. I did attend the one last year, the 2 days, and it was really, really worthwhile. As you know, we are now on COVID-19, which is the newest one. So if you are still using COVID-5, you need to upgrade your knowledge and make sure that you keep up with the times. So don't miss that as well. Please register for that post-conference workshop, which will be on the 9th and 10th of June. We are still looking for sponsors. And because it's a virtual event, it's slightly cheaper than what our normal on-site events are. So please do contact our office if you would like to sponsor from as little as 4,000 rands to 21,000 rands. We would like to see more and more of our members also being sponsors, so that we can be, providing you with better services. Our theme, as you know, if you don't, it's adapting in changing times. And I think all of us, we've been grappling with all these quick changes that are happening. So it's going to be jam-packed, and there's going to be a whole lot of aspect on how you can, tackle this changing times, because the changes have not stopped. They're still going to come, and you need to be making sure that you are prepared. I know a lot of us have had some challenges with backlogs where, either your membership has been revoked, or your certificate has been revoked, or you haven't got your acknowledgement that you've paid for your membership, whatever it might be. Please go directly to the support.isaka.org and log a case there. And you can log one ticket for all your issues, and they will get back to you. They normally respond quite quickly. And if they don't, you just send a follow-up with your reference number, and they will resolve your issues. Don't forget, please remember, last year, after working extremely hard with SAQA, we managed to get ourselves designations for the Information System Audit Professional, or ISAP, which is you get if you have a CISA, and as well as an ISMP for the security management. You need to have a CISM for that. If you have not yet done so to apply for the designation, it is free to our members, and you have to be a member of the ISACA SA chapter. Please do apply. There's still time. It's not going to be free forever, so take advantage of the opportunity to apply for it, and you can add that as one of your designations on your name. There is a cybersecurity fundamentals update. The new exam will be starting from June, so please do note that as well. We also want to make sure that we are ahead of the time, so we are currently, as ISACA, updating our courses and our offerings. For those of you who are going to be writing CISM and CISA, we do have workshops that will be running in July and August. So the 4 weeks in July will be running the CISM workshops. This will help you to prepare for the exam, and I think it's very, very important. You don't want to be paying all that money for the exam and not pass. And we'll also be running the CISA one in August. It's on Saturdays. So please do check those out and register. You can contact Eugene in the office at info@isaka.org.za to get more information. That is all our announcements for today. I'm going to now introduce our guest speaker, who is also a very dear friend of mine. And thank you very much, Tebello, for agreeing to present to these lovely professionals. Tebello is a leadership and business consultant. She's got 20 years of experience in management and leadership of human capital. She's held executive positions in a range of industries, including banking, electricity, and aviation. She has held non-executive director positions in investment and education-related organizations on a global stage. She has provided leadership skills in the development of a viable and successful regional airports leadership in Africa. She is experienced in working effectively in global organizations that are based in Africa. She has effectively managed projects and stakeholders, and she's an experienced moderator and MC for large-scale international events and conferences. She's an advocate for the development of communities through the development and empowerment of women. And I can definitely attest to that, not because she's my friend, but because she's been doing a great work in representing South Africa in the global scale as far as women empowerment and development is concerned. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome Tebello. Tebello, thank you very much. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Khabu, and good afternoon. I doubt if there is any good morning that I would have to say to anyone, because I think we are all here in South Africa. I'm just so used to now sitting in sessions where you go good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm really excited to have been invited to join you in this session. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you, the little bit of information and experience that I can be able to share with you. And I hope that you will find it quite valuable. All I remember of auditing and risk in the days when I used to be in corporate was when the internal audit departments would come to us in human resources, and we would have to be providing proof of the documentation that supports, the work that we do. I must say, I have never interacted with an IT auditor or an IT risk manager, so I'm quite excited to be here. I will be spending probably the next 45 minutes with you. Maybe about 30 minutes will be spent on, this presentation. And the focus of today's session, in terms of what I'm speaking about, is on authentic leadership. And it's really, for me, aligned to, your theme around adapting to changing times, because there's quite a lot of change that is taking place and has taken place. And all of us have found ourselves, impacted and affected in one way or another. However, before we go into, the topic of authentic leadership, I'm going to ask you to please join us and participate, in this next activity. We'll probably take about 5 to 7 minutes on this activity before I start with the presentation. And the activity is as follows, right? So we are going to do an icebreaker, and it is an expectation from myself, from Khabu, Eugene, and the leadership of ISACA that you're participating in this. And basically, the long and short of it is this: there's 15 of us, or 15 of you, that are finding themselves, in a plane crash. In the Sahara Desert, right, up there in North Africa. Unfortunately, the 3 crew members, because we're flying, you were flying in a very small plane, are seriously injured and are not in a position to assist you. However, before the crash, the pilot had indicated that you're about 70 miles, southwest of a village farm, which is basically the nearest place for habitation and where you'll be able to get assistance. So 15 of you are now stranded here in the middle of the desert. Now, here's the challenge. You have a number of items that you were able to salvage before, the crash, and you were able to get 13 items, out of the plane. And your task individually is to decide on the 4 most important items. Now, how you are going to participate in this activity, I will share with you the list of, those items now, is that we'd like you to write in your chat box, right, indicating to us what are the 4 out of the list of the 13 that you're going to see. What are the top 4 that you're going to take? It doesn't have to be in any order of priority, but I'm looking for the 4 items that are most important that you will be taking. All right, where are you? Okay. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Sorry, guys, my mouse is giving me a bit of a challenge. So we go to the old mouse. Right, so here are the 13 items. You have about 2 minutes right now to think of these 13 items, and in the chat box, indicate which are the 4 most important that you will be taking. Okay, I'm not seeing, okay, there we are. Tabiso, is that all? Okay. Oh, Tebello, just a knife. Okay. Okay. My laptops and phones. Oh, try more. One coat per person. Okay, interesting. Okay. Let's give it about 15 more seconds. Right. Okay, cool. Interesting responses. Not sure why the laptop and my phones, but somebody's going to be taking that. Well, I suppose being an IT person, yes, that's really key to take with you. All right. Eugene, can I share the responses now? Do you think we've got enough responses for me to take it to the next level?
Yeah, sure. Tebello, it was only in the chats.
Okay, I think maybe let's give it a few minutes. Let's see.
The responses are coming in fast and furious.
Yes, let's give people a few minutes because this might just be the one that makes you win a prize. So I don't want to disadvantage anyone. It would be good if let's see. Okay. Are we still getting?
I see the last one that I'm seeing was from Sehuela.
Okay.
Okay, maybe let's leave it there for now.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So after anybody, Khabo, that writes their response after Sohuela does not qualify for the prize, right?
Yes.
Vincent has come in.
If you want a prize, go in right now. This is your last chance. We are going to, I'm going to count down. So this is your last chance. Vincent. Okay. You've got, right. I'm counting. I'm gonna start counting down now. Let me do my stopwatch. 30 seconds. Okay, so where's my stopwatch timer? And I'm seriously gonna make it 30 seconds. So your fingers better be very fast. Starting now. You will hear my phone going 28, 25 seconds, 20 seconds, 15 seconds. Okay, someone send me a direct message.
Is it?
Okay. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, we close. I got. Oh, we tuned. Hey, just in the nick of time. Okay, so yeah, Bitumelo is the last one. So the office will collect the chats and analyze the answers.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Everybody, thank you very much for participating in the activity. Now let's see. Well, I did not see the laptop and, in the list here, but let's see what the experts say should have been the top 4 that you would have taken, right? Number 1, the mirror, okay? Because you are in the desert, remember? So you could be able to reflect it. So if anybody is flying or moving around there, they'd be able to see that reflection. And hopefully if they are rescue people, they would then be able to come through and help you. The second one, the top coat, right? So you're in the desert, it's going to be hot and you're moving around. So it's quite essential to keep the skin dry and to keep you as hydrated for as long as possible. Thirdly, water, yes. So a lot of people indicating, water, mainly, to ensure that people stay hydrated. But obviously being 15, you're also going to have to manage how much of that water, is being taken by the individuals. And the last of the top 4 would be a flashlight. So that in case you find yourself still walking in the desert, because remember, as you walk in the desert, sometimes you might end up finding yourself going round and round and round and round, unless in your group of 15, you have somebody that's very good with directions. So if you are walking around, you might find yourself still walking at night, trying to get to the village that you needed to get to. Let's see the next 4. I'm not going to show all 13 of them, but what would have been some of them: the parachutes, again for shelter, the knife, if you need to be cutting down the parachute, the plastic sheet, again for hydration, and the pistol, in case you get impatient with one of your members. However, the ones that we were interested in were these top 4. Now, why did I use this as an icebreaker? I used it because the challenge that we have, or as I go into my presentation, I'm really going to be spending a lot on how the brain functions and why the brain is such an important aspect, in our lives. There are 3 elements that I will be addressing today. The one is the concept called VUCA, and then also on the topic of authentic leadership, and lastly on the concept of SCARF. Why is it that we want to, so the context that I want to provide is as follows. Why I use the desert survival as an activity for us to engage is because the brain's role in our bodies is one, nothing else except for our survival, right? The brain is continuously feeling, sensing, touching, seeing, hearing, anything that is happening around you that is either going to bring a reward or it's going to bring a threat. The brain is going to ensure that your body, is protected, which is why sometimes, you found yourself in an environment and all of a sudden you're feeling, you move or you do something, and only when you turn around, you realize, hold on, there might have been, an accident that I could have been involved in, something else could have happened. Same thing as when you get involved, in an accident, the brain is the one that takes over to make sure that the body is protected from any other elements that might be taking place. So the same thing when we're dealing with you being in the desert, the first thing that the brain is doing is, does this person need to be hydrated? Does this person need to be moving? What else is the person needing to be doing? However, what is important as well is that because of this key component or key aspect that the brain is looking at, which is around ensuring that we survive, the same happens in our work environment. In the environment that you work in, with the people that you work with the projects that you work with, the first thing, without you being aware of it, it's this issue of surviving. It's this issue, am I going to make it on time? Am I getting the results that I'm looking at? It's really around ensuring that you are continually surviving. However, our survival in these days, right, is happening in a very, unusual environment. All of us that are here have been impacted by the COVID. We all didn't anticipate, unless if you have somebody that's close in the medical space that might have indicated to you what was coming, but none of us anticipated what was coming. And what that has led to, it has led us to be exposed to this concept of VUCA. Let us watch this video here to be able to see, get a bit of understanding of what VUCA is about. Right, so all of us in our own way, we have actually been VUCA'd in the last 12 to 16 months, right? We have realized, remember we got to a point where we could not move out of our homes for a while, and it was not safe for most of us, to be able to do so. So we found ourselves in this volatile environment because we all were so scared to say we've been told, to stay indoors, to social distance, and what is it that it meant? And more importantly, the question that people then were asking themselves is, what does it mean from a work point of view, right? Even at the time when we were able to move out of our homes and we could go to the shops, a lot of us were paranoid because I don't know if I'm going to the shops, if the people that I'm going to be meeting are people that have been infected, by COVID, or what the situation is like. So, and even with the people that we had in our homes, there was always this question in terms of, have you been affected? Could you be affected? And when we found out about the comorbidities, all of us even got a lot more concerned. On the second concept, in terms of being uncertain, when we came across a person, we were never sure. To this day, some of us are still not sure if at the minute somebody coughs. Remember the first time when you went to the shop and you were standing in a queue and somebody coughed, And you can remember all that, feedback or reaction that people had on, are you coughing because you've got COVID, or what is it that's making you to be coughing? Some people were also uncertain because they had spent a number of days and in some instances months without working. And the question they were asking themselves is whether they will still be able to have work, whether they'll be able to go back, into their work environment. From a complexity point of view, oh my goodness, how many of us all of a sudden found ourselves as an employee, as a homeschool teacher, right? As the cook in the house, and as so many other elements that you had to play. And you had to play all of those elements or address them all at once. And when we were able to get back into the work environment, then all of a sudden, I'm no longer going to the office, but I'm working from home. And when I'm working from home, does my area have the right, broadband for me to be able to connect into the meetings and the work environment that I need to be getting into? We remember the joke that we used to have with Zoom, that everybody that went into Zoom was like, hello, can you hear me? All of those elements. And for a lot of people, that brought a lot of stress for them, because now I used to be for 8 hours in the work environment, and then after that I come to work, or I go to the gym, or my day was planned out. Now all of a sudden my day is compressed, as I said, into being an employee, a mother, a husband, a wife, a caretaker for those of you that either have people who, have ailments, or people that are older. And therefore the complexity of how you were living your life, had then got into a point of just expanding. From an ambiguous point of view, when COVID started, we were dealing with an unknown, right? We were wondering, is this the same as what we saw in the movie Contagion, or is it something else that, we're having to deal with? And also, what does it mean for me? If I get infected with COVID, what does it actually mean for me? What does it mean, for my family, for my clients? If my client gets infected with this, what does it mean for them? If my client's business gets to be impacted, by COVID, what does it mean in terms of their business? If the service that I was providing to the client, what does it mean? The challenge with VUCA is that all of this, right, were happening all at the same time. Whereas prior, to COVID, we might have dealt with these issues, in separate matters. All of a sudden, we're now dealing with a volatile environment and uncertainty about our future, complex, life challenges that we're dealing with, not sure what the future actually holds for us and how we're going to be able to deal with that. We were dealing with all of these things at the same time, in the various levels that they were dealing with. And in the same time, the challenge is that you still need to lead yourself as a business person. And for those of you that have got people, reporting to them, you would remember the number of times where your employees or your subordinates are getting in touch with you, trying to understand, what does this mean for our business? And you realize that the responses you need to provide are responses that you may never have had to think about. But now you are standing here, you've got an employee that's looking at you or engaging with you and saying, what does this mean for us? And how are we going to remain in business? Because we recognize that it's going to mean that we're dealing with business as unusual. However, in as much as we see this particular aspect of understanding VUCA, the beauty of this concept is that you can still be able to lead yourself in this process, and you can be able to lead the people through this pandemic. In that, here are some ideas that you could be able to look at from, when you are dealing with a business that's, now working in a volatile environment. It's about, how do you build slack in the, for example, the prices? Could you be able to build slack? Obviously, you need to then justify it to your clients. You need to be able to review and integrate additional steps, into the processes and in your offerings, things that you may not have had to think about, or things that you may have had to think about, but maybe they were in the back burner, and now you're finding yourselves that you have to bring them a whole lot more forward. From an uncertainty point of view, what you would need to do is ensure that you research. And sometimes as you're researching, it's really looking for information in unusual places, right? It's looking for other processes that you may not have thought impact your business, but being able to say, could I be able to bring some of these processes into my environment? You might be having to be looking in terms of your client and how you're advising them to be able to say, how do they look? We talk about the concept of the business working in silos. And what COVID and what VUCA requires people to do is to move as quickly as possible from working in silos, but working in an integrated manner, because you never know where the resolutions or where the opportunities may be coming in. From a complexity point of view, is in terms of understanding where are the complexities that have surfaced and how can you restructure your solution to your client. How can the client restructure the solutions in their businesses, and what other resources do they need to be bringing for them to be able to deal with these new complexities? And lastly, from an ambiguity point of view, it's really around looking at the self and being able to say, how do you develop further in ways that you're able to take the lessons that you have learned, that through the development, be able to come and apply them in this, world of work. As I've indicated, the challenge with VUCA is that we have to keep all of these considerations at the same time. Furthermore, change is happening at such a fast pace, and it's happening all the time. So the question I want to leave with you on this concept of VUCA is the question that says, when you think about your business, when you think about your solutions, how will you add value to your clients in this time of VUCA? How are you going to add value to your clients during this time of VUCA? Because the way things look, this period is not going to go back to where it used to be. In fact, the rate of which we are going to be dealing with VUCA is going to double, if not triple, in the next 2 to 3 years. So the question is, how do you then add value for your clients during this particular time? Now, understanding that the context that you're working in is a VUCA context, a context that needs you, to always be alert in terms of what is happening, to be looking for solutions in areas that you may not have had to think about. How then do you develop, your authentic leadership skills or persona, in this space? And there are various elements I want to bring in from an authentic leadership perspective. And the first one, all of these insights come from a group called the Insights Group. The first one about authentic leadership, it's really knowing what are your guiding compasses in your job? What are your values? What are your beliefs, principles, and morals? And how do you stick with those even during the VUCA times? When you're engaging with clients, what are their values? What are their principles? What are their processes? And how do they continue as well to keep to being authentic to their business even during the VUCA times? Secondly, authentic leadership requires that the individual remains genuine to themselves, that you do not become a replica, not a copy or an imitation, as Steve Robinson says. How do you stay genuine to yourself? How do you stay listening to that gut feel that you have? How do you stay being the person that always is asking the difficult questions or providing the leadership even in difficult times? Thirdly, what authentic leadership requires is for each of us to continually be committing to our own learning in order to be able to understand ourselves as individuals and how we interact and see the world and how we interact with others as, we work with them. Other insights in terms of, authentic leadership, it's really around getting the ego out of the way. You know the information, you have the experience. To be an authentic leader, it's not about you. To become an authentic leader, it's about empowering, truly empowering and developing others. It's about leaving them with the skills. It's about ensuring that you're able to help them bring out the best of their talents in the work that they are doing. And you can do that even if you don't have people that are reporting to you, but remember, you are able to influence and inspire others. It's really around leaving the ego behind. And in terms of being able to influence and inspire others, it also requires you to be able, to reveal a little bit about yourself. If I'm going to be working with Khabo and all the focus that we have with Khabo is just on work, and I really don't get time or don't make time to get to know who Khabo is and what are the triggers for Khabo, either from a threat point of view or from a reward point of view, in the long run, the relationship, is going to be, is going to end up, being impacted. It's also about being consistent. Authentic leaders are consistent and they provide results or outcomes that are above par. And why are they able to stay consistent? It's because they are able to align to their personal values. Remember the first aspect that we looked at to be an authentic leader, we said you need to be able to understand your values, your principles, your morals, etc. They are consistent and they're able to achieve above par outcomes because they're able to develop others. They recognize that there will be a time where they will not be in that space, but other people need to be able to step into that leadership space, and they want to have ensured that they have left a legacy with them. And lastly, it's also about ensuring that you build sustainable, successful organizations. Authentic leaders do not build organizations that in 2 or 3 years' time are going to disappear. Authentic leaders build organizations that are going to be there for the future. Authentic leaders in a VUCA world build sustainable organizations that are able to get through the VUCA processes that they would have to be dealing with. Now, having understood that you are dealing and working with everything in a VUCA environment and understanding some of these aspects, of being an authentic leader, let me then propose to you a model that you could be able to look at in terms of how you could improve or add to your arsenal of skills of becoming a, an authentic leader. And the concept that I want to share with you, it's really this concept that is called SCAF. It's called the SCAF model. You can Google it at any time. Now, the SCAF model is a brain-based model, right? That deals with how we collaborate with other people. The SCAF model is based on that aspect about the brain, but the fact that the brain is always looking at, am I getting a reward here? Or is there a threat that I need to be dealing with here? Right? And the SCAF model was developed by a gentleman by the name of David Rock in 2008. And it's based on 3 key elements, right? The first element is that the brain treats many of the social threats and rewards in the same intensity as the physical threats and rewards. The brain treats many of the social threats and rewards in the same way that it treats the intensity of the physical threats and rewards. Secondly, is that our capacity to be able to make decisions and to solve problems and collaborate with each other is generally reduced by a threat or response and increased under a reward response. So I will work and engage with people where I foresee that there's going to be a reward that I get there. Where I may foresee a threat, whether it is an obvious threat or it is a hidden threat, all of a sudden I'm going to find myself wanting to step away from that. And sometimes the threat can be as simple as being given a project that I need to work on. It's the first time that I'm working on, but because I am scared that I've never worked on this project, I then stand back because I foresee it, or my brain foresees it as a threat, until I start thinking, what can I learn out of this project and how can I improve my skills? And lastly, why the SCAF concept, the element that the SCAF concept works on is that the threat response is more intense, whether physical, mental, or social. It's a lot more intense and it's more common and often needs us to be carefully minimizing it as we interact with people. You know what it's like, how it's like that sometimes you move or you meet somebody, but something just says to you, I don't gel with this person, right? And sometimes you don't know why you don't gel with a person until one day you sit back and something about the individual takes you back to your growing up, takes you back to an experience that you've had. So it's only until you separate the individual from that experience that you have that you become more comfortable, you know, to be able to engage with those individuals. Now let's understand what are these 5, you know, domains of SCAF. Firstly, the domain that we're dealing with is status, our relative importance to others. And whether it's our relative importance to others or the relative importance of others to us, that's where the status element, you know, comes in. You know how it is that sometimes when you go into a meeting and you're dealing with somebody, before you go into the content, right, you must have kind of patted them back in the, patted them in the back, complimented them on their outfit, complimented them on the office, complimented them on something, then they come in, you know, into the space. And other times when you're dealing with people where certainty, you know, is a key element, these people want to be able to know, can they predict the future? If you're a certainty person, you want to know the information. If somebody says to you, it's going to take us plus minus 30 minutes, you know, to move from Pretoria to Joburg, you're like, exactly how many minutes is it going to take us? I don't want to hear plus or minus. What is exact, you know, the time that it is going to be able to take us to travel. From an autonomy point of view, for those people where autonomy, you know, comes up quite strongly, they want to feel that they have a sense of control over events. So if you have clients that you're working with, and even if you provide them, you have done an audit, you provide them with a report, they want to feel that the report belongs to them, not to you. It's their report. So how do you then work with them? How do you find a way of ensuring that you're able to convert the report, that it's their report, even though the input, you know, is yours? On the R side, which is relatedness, is where you're dealing with individuals where the safety of others is important. You might give them an audit or a risk report that indicates that, you know, if they don't deal with certain things in the business runs the risk, you know, of being closed. And the first question they will ask is, oh my God, if the business is closed, what's going to happen to the people? They don't think about themselves, they don't think about the business, they think about other people. You may be one of those people as well, where relatedness, you know, is a key domain in the way that you interact, you know, with other people. And lastly, those, you know, that are more prone to fairness, those are the ones that, as you engage with them, you know, the perception of fair exchanges between people is quite important. You could walk into a meeting and you're engaging with a number of people, and you find yourself maybe engaging with 1 or 2 people in the meeting, and somebody then says, but you have not spoken to everybody that is in the meeting. That is one of those examples. So the question then that, you know, you ask yourself, or I'm asking you, is a question then that says, having understood or having gotten a sense, you may not understand, but you have a sense of the SCAF model. The question is then, how then do you lead yourself as an authentic leader, you know, dealing with this issue of SCAF, or using the SCAF model in the way that you interact with others? So if you look from a status point of view, it's that when you're engaging with people that you have a sense that, you know, status is quite key for them, it's to be able to recognize and share with them the improvements, provide positive feedback, because that is what is going to bring them into the next conversation, where now you're ready to share, you know, with them the various reports that you want to share with them. To also, when you're dealing with people that you know this one wants certainty, they want the facts, they want it in black and white, it's also important that you are able to clarify expectations, agree on the plan, be able to say, if it goes A, what are we going to do? If it goes B, what are we going to do? If C comes along, what are we going to do? Because that's the kind of certainty that they're looking for. You may be that kind of a leader. You may be that kind of a person. Recognize this about yourself, so that when you engage with people out there, you are able to indicate to them why you want information in a particular way. Thirdly, from an autonomy point of view, it's ensuring that you're able to help people to be able to review the policies and be able to adjust to the current environment. But as you do that, you know, you remind them that they have led this conversation and you are coming to the results because they've really played a key role in ensuring that the results that you are looking for them to achieve are achieved. With relatedness, it's when you're engaging with people about sharing stories. There are people that when you go and meet with them and you engage with, before you go into the detail of what certainty people would require, they want you to share stories, tell you, there are meetings, you've seen meetings where 15 minutes into the meeting, we're still talking about our children. We're still talking about what happened over the weekend. We're talking about things that have nothing to do with the meeting, but it's because it creates a sense of relatedness between myself and yourself. By the time you get into, the details, I feel like I have a connection with you, excuse me, or you feel like you have a connection with the person. And lastly, in terms of fairness, it's really around ensuring that when you provide information, you're increasing the transparency and the communication. These are the types of clients that you don't just talk to them once a week. You talk to them almost every day, even if it's just a minute, 2 minutes. We are busy with the report. We have completed, the assessment. This is how far we have the report. We are expecting you to be able to receive it by this time. So communication becomes important, because remember, they are going to take that information and they are going to share with the others in their business, so that everybody feels that there has been a sense, of fairness that has been, provided. My final words through to you, having spoken on VUCA, authentic leadership, and the SCAF model, I'll say to you, here are the 3 components that I want to leave you with. Number 1 is that as you work with your clients, learn more about the clients. Learn more about the clients that you work with by listening to them through questions. Spend time asking them questions, because you're then able to determine, what kind of information or interaction going further you need to be having with them. Secondly, understand that each client will have a preferred way of receiving, your information, whatever the report that you're going to be providing to them. Not all the clients are going to be the same. So it's important that as you engage with them, you get to know a little bit more. And finally, I would say to you, each person may have a preferred, response in the SCAF model, the same as you and I may have a preferred response using the SCAF model. However, it is not this is something that we automatically fall on, but as human beings, we are able to adjust, we're able to be agile and be able to recognize that there will be times when I need to become more of a fair leader. There will be times where I need to become more of an autonomous leader, depending on the circumstances that we're dealing with. So for me, I would say to you, those would be the aspects from a leadership point of view that I would leave with you to say, become more of an authentic leader. Understand, recognize your values, your morals, your principles, practice them in the world of work. Learn to know more about the people that you are engaging with, about the leaders of the businesses that you are engaging with. And the SCAF model can be one of the models that you are able to use to get to that. If you'd like to get hold of me, in future, these are my details where you would be able to get hold of me. Khabu, can I hand over back to you?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Tebello. Wow, that was a mouthful. And I hope that everyone has been listening.
Khabu, I'm going to
can you hear me? Yeah. You can just okay. Yeah, it's fine. I think for me, there's a few points that I've taken, and I think this is so relevant to us as auditors. And I think before I go to my thoughts, I'll just read what's on the chat. So Nobuhle Kumalo says one could be a combination of a number of these at once, right? I suppose you're talking, Nobuhle, talking about the SCAF element, right? Because my thinking is it really depends on who you are dealing with. Once you understand, yes, okay, yes. Yeah, it could be a combination of those. Well, sorry. Why am I answering?
Yes, you could be able to apply any of those domains. However, remember, in any situation for you to be able to apply them, you need to have learned how to read the situation and to be able to step into it in the right mode. So yes, it could be, you could be applying them in different ways.
Are you seeing the...
I'm seeing their comments, yes.
Okay, cool.
So Sekwela says, under difficult conditions, autonomy tends to regress and get out of hand. Is there a way to balance this when the environment is hard to change? Maybe. Yes, there are other models, Sekwela, that you could be able, to apply. But in this situation, obviously, where you see that autonomy is regressing, one of the key things, remember, one of the elements I said is about engaging with the clients and using a questioning mode, because you need to then understand why is it regressing, so that the solution that you're able to provide them is then the right solution for the changes that are taking place. Sometimes it might just be regressing because I'm not ready to hear you. It could be just that simple. So how then do you engage me to get to a point where I'm ready to hear you? How easy is it to unlearn?
Or how difficult is it to unlearn?
It's not easy to unlearn. What is important about any leadership aspect or any leadership model, or the model that I've shared with you, is continuously being aware of what is it that is leading you to that particular reaction at that particular moment. Therefore, it means for you to become a more authentic leader, you then need to be getting to know a little bit more about yourself on a continuous basis.
Okay, are there any other questions, points? Okay, thanks, Nabutle, Tabiso, and Sequela, or Sequela. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Pardon me. Thanks for those questions, comments. I think from my side, Tebello, I think as auditors, and as someone who practices in that space, it's very important to really know your clients, because you are dealing with different personalities at different times. Sometimes you even have names for them. You have like problem children. If you are dealing with this person and there is a finding that is not favorable, then you really have to use a different approach to talk to them. There are some people, like you say, who you must on a regular basis be checking up and calling them and sending a message, just so that they know that you are transparent with what you do. And unfortunately, there is still a lot of people who don't trust us as auditors. There's still a lot of people who think that we are out there to find what they're doing wrong and make them lose their jobs. So as it becomes a tough job to convince our clients that we're actually there to help them identify areas where they could have missed something, and therefore they have risk exposures in their environment. So I always say, you need to know your client first before you can even go into audit their area, and remembering that you must always tell people you're not auditing the person but the process. So I think this is very important to us as auditors, because on a daily basis you deal with people. You deal with human beings, and you need to understand and know them well so that you know how to deal with them. So this for me is quite insightful. And I know a lot of us are probably at the year end and are busy closing out reports and fighting with our auditees because you have unfavorable findings. It's about how you communicate with them and the relationship that you have with them. So relationships are very important, but doing so in a professional way so that you don't compromise your independence and professionalism. So thank you very much, Tebello. That was really very insightful for me. And I see Tabi saying also, oh, Tabi saying, is this nepotism now? I'm joking. It was a very insightful, a very insightful And I think also, and this doesn't just apply to auditors, because in any part of the organization, you have people that you call your customers, people that you deal with, that you will need things from, that you need buy-in from sometimes. So this is not just for auditors. It's, for me, it's in any operational environment as well. You do need buy-in from your customers, the people that you are there to serve. So it's important. Influence is required. Yes, Utimela, I agree with you. Influence is one of the required skills for auditors. But you need to start right at the beginning by knowing the person. Know the person, because remember, you're not auditing a person, you are auditing the environment, but they are the people who are going to be giving you the answers. Sequela has asked, are there personality assessments that map out your SCAF profile? Sorry.
Yes, Sequela, there are. What I'll do is I'll share them. I'll share some of them with Khabo. And also remember that with any assessments, I don't want to call it personality, but with any assessments that you do, don't just do it once, do it every 2-3 years, because as circumstances change, you also start having different preferences. Today, you may be in this call as an auditor. In 2 years' time, you are in this call as a manager of auditors or as a CEO of a company. And therefore, certain things would have changed, because there's a particular way now that you need to be engaging and leading the business. So it's also important that if you find yourself doing any assessments in your life, whether it's personality or whatever it is that we want to call them, that you don't just do it once and then leave it there. You continually do it as and when you see a change happening in your life.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're going to leave it there, because we are now going into the next session. Thank you very much, Tebello. Really appreciate all those insights. And I think as auditors, sometimes, yes, we do need to step back, especially in technical people, whether you are an auditor or you are a practitioner in assurance, risk and compliance or governance. We sometimes need to step back and say, how do I deal with the people? And now it's even worse when you can't see faces, and sometimes you can't see reactions on people's faces. So you are dealing with a screen. So it's important that we understand all these profiles. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is not new to this forum. She spoke to us in our previous forum. Her name is Candice Jackson. She is a senior managing consultant at Mobius. Excuse me, consulting, and she's been there for over 9 years. Her core areas of experience include privacy and third-party risk management. She has assisted several clients with practically implementing both these disciplines across various industries. She is also a young mother who demonstrates how women can achieve a successful career with an equally wonderful personal life as a wife, mother, and a daughter. And for those of you who attended our the previous Johannesburg Professional Forum, you would have been an audience to her presentation, where she spoke about how she has been managing all those roles that she has to play while being a professional. With that said, Candice, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Khabo, and good evening, everybody. So I think as per my bio and intro into who I am, so a topic that really is close to my heart, and two topics that are actually close to my heart, is bringing third-party risk management and privacy together. So to know or not to know your business partners. And always, I love to start with a picture. So I think if I had to show this picture maybe a few years ago, a lot of us would be in the not knowing space. So not knowing who our business partners, our third parties, our vendors, our suppliers, whichever one we want to refer to them as today. And the knowing would be sort of, the top of it. And not knowing, I think, causes a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk. And I think that's what we really want to unpack today is, the knowing versus the not knowing. What are those risks that come to the forefront, looking at it specifically from a privacy perspective and a privacy angle. And I think the reason for that is not only because of PAPIA and the deadline, which is around the corner, but just looking at it because it has brought it to the forefront even more. So yes, it started being taken more seriously a few years ago, but I think with privacy, we've seen it even more. And those are just some of the aspects that we are going to touch on today. Things that we're going to cover. So what is a third party? Just to make sure that we are all on the same page, who would be constituted as a third party? Why is the use of third parties increasing? Why third parties affect privacy? Some third-party data breaches, as well as how privacy has changed an organization's view and use of third parties, and tips to make sure using third parties don't affect your privacy operations. So that's just a few things that we're going to cover today. Please post your questions in the chat. If I am looking at the chat functionality, I will try and look at it. Alternatively, at the end, I'll make sure that I do go back and answer any of the questions that you do have. So what is a third party? So we have a formal definition of what a third party is, and it can be defined as anyone or a natural or juristic person that fulfills a service or part of a service for or on behalf of your organization. They may have access to different levels of information. So public information, personal information, company information, and then prior, maybe more before COVID, sitting on site or then even working remotely as we see nowadays. We have different types of third parties. So your vendors and your suppliers, whichever one you would refer to them as, or even our service providers, joint ventures. And then an interesting topic that, you know, more and more people are starting to realize, and it's coming more to the forefront, is this term of fourth parties. So for me, in simple terms, if we had to say what is a third party, it's an extension of our business that they've been contracted and they perform a service on or behalf of the organization. They're not directly employed by the organization. And obviously where it now starts getting tricky is that when information is being shared with these third parties, that's when it becomes more important. So, you know, you have different types of third parties that you're going to look at. So you're going to look at your cleaning staff, and if you have catering services. But as things move along and they start providing systems and support or recruitment assistance, and they really start getting more and more entrenched in your business, I think that level of the third party then also starts changing and evolving within your organization. So that's just the third party term that we're going to be using. Obviously, I'm sure we could unpack a few more types of third parties across different landscapes. And I mean, happy to, if you want to post some in the chat on other third parties that you would also consider that we could discuss today. A third party under privacy, if we look at it from a GDPR, so General Data Protection Regulation, so that's the EU privacy regulation, which is actually out. They refer to a third party particularly as a processor. So any person, natural, who is processing information about another individual or processing on behalf of a controller. So that's the terminology that they use. Under PAPIA, it is specifically mentioned as third party, but in some of the instances and some of the organizations we've been in, there also is the term as operator. So when you're taking that privacy lens, these ones specifically are the ones that have an impact from a personal information, from a privacy perspective, and that's just the terminology. So if you don't always just hear third party and you're starting to hear processor or operator, you can see those terminologies coming out more and more. There's a few more others like an information discloser and an information receiver. You'll see those coming out from a third party specific and privacy specific perspective. Don't get confused, and I think don't get muddled up on it. And I think where you can influence your organization to sort of use one terminology. For me, standardized terminology always works a little bit better. So that's just covering some of the basis before we get into a bit more detail. If we look at, why is the use of third parties increasing? Yes, we've got some very specifics on the screen. So just unpacking a little bit of each. So from an outsourcing perspective, I think every organization, because of many different reasons, starts to outsource a number of different things. Cloud services have obviously seen a massive increase, and through the use of cloud services, those particular providers become third parties in your organization. If you still have pretty much everything on site, I think majority of people would say, okay, guys, are you sure? Everything is moving into the cloud. And that's why the need for cloud service providers are increasing. But as that increases, so does the risk. But the trend, moving things onto the cloud, having those providers definitely does increase the use of third parties, does also increase the risk of using those third parties. What we've also seen, if I could look back in 2016, when this really started becoming quite topical again, was, if you had to go and look for third-party data breaches, you really wouldn't find a lot of information. You'd have to search quite hard for statistics, but because of how smart our cyber criminals are becoming, they know that there is sometimes a weak link with third parties, and they know that there's easy access with getting information from third parties or through third parties. I know things are becoming a lot more sophisticated, making sure that there's integration, APIs, sending things via secure messages, etc. But our cyber criminals are specifically targeting third parties because they know that everything's not to the mature state that it needs to be. And that's where that opportunity just happens. And it's so easy to just take advantage of. The next one is just our regulatory pressure. So, I mean, with POPI, GDPR, and I think from any industry, no matter what industry you are in, you'll see that these pressures increase all the time. And the reason why third parties are brought on board is because you can't handle the pressures of everything that is required. So if we look at everything just from a privacy perspective right now, if I look at us as Mobius Consulting, we are being brought into a lot of organizations because of POPI being a regulatory pressure. So we going in, we assessing, everybody's trying to get their house in order when it comes to POPI. So just one angle in terms of a new legislation that's coming in shows you how much you need more consultants. So not only are we then being brought on from a consulting perspective, but then we are also being brought on from an implementation. So now another third party that's added on, and we're part of the process. So we also are seen as these third parties to many organizations. And when you start unpacking the regulatory pressure, you'll see how many other third parties also need to be brought on board just to make sure that whether large or small industries and organizations can actually cope with the pressures. Partnerships demanding good practice. To have that good practice, you need good people and good third parties around, and people are wanting to have partnerships more. I think when we saw a big number of people losing jobs in the last year, because you've lost your resources, but you still need to continue with your business, you need to form those good partnerships, and you now start relying on previous consultants or previous audit companies that you would have used, or previous external consultants that could also still be seen as third parties because they're not full-time employees, sees that increase of third-party usage again. Insufficient resources is 100% one of the key ones why often companies look to use third parties. We've seen it a number of times where we've gone in to fulfill a role on behalf of a resource or department that is no longer there. We've seen the increase in it now, and it's because companies need to get things done, especially in these evolving times, these digital transformation times. What you're seeing is that there is this resource constraint. The workload doesn't end, or the workload doesn't tame down, and to make sure that you continue with the demand and you continue with the progression that you need to, you use a third party. So again, an increase in use of third parties. And then outdated models. So no matter what sphere of work you're looking at, no matter what industry you're looking at, the reason why third parties are also used and the increase of use is because they come with the latest knowledge. That's what they are there for. If you specifically look at any of your tech companies or any of your consulting or your auditing firms, those specifically, they're always looking for the next way or the next best thing or the next way to do things in the best possible light to give you the most efficiency, whereas you are focused on what your core business operations are. So what do? You bring that third party in, or you bring that cloud provider in, so to make sure that you move with the trend, that you move with the times, that you move with the digital transformation, to make sure that you don't lose sight of where you also want to get to, while still operating your core business. So those are just some of the reasons why there is this increase in use of third party. Definitely, it does come with increased risk. always scary. And often we don't always consider, what the risk is. We also always don't know, how many third parties there are in an organization. I think we've done a number of exercises, where we just try and get stock take of how many third parties. And often, whether big or small organizations, we find that we can't get to this total number of third parties, but we are seeing these lists grow on a daily. Now, while some organizations' business model is to have third parties acting on their behalf or being an extension of them. So if I look at anything within the insurance space and there's a broker being used or an intermediary being used, those are all seen as third parties and extensions of business. And there's a business need for that because that's how they bring money in. Whereas if you look at other organizations, that their third parties are really to provide services to them. So cleaning, catering, your IT services, recruitment services, so any HR related things. So it just depends, but no matter what organization, no matter what industry, the increase in the use of third parties has definitely and will continue to increase over the next few years. However, with that increase does come the increase in risk. And I'm going to get Eugene to put a poll up for us just regarding, looking at data breaches and third parties. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that, if you had to do a Google search a few years ago, you really wouldn't find a lot of information. But in your opinion, what percentage of data breaches do you think are as a result of third parties? So weakness in their controls, they've acted not in the way that they should have been doing. So they haven't been acting in your best regards from an organization perspective. What percentage of data breaches, of current data breaches, do you think are as a result of third parties? So we'll give a few seconds. I see the responses are coming in quite nicely.
Candice, how much time do you want to give for the poll?
We'll give it another 10 seconds, Khabo, and then we'll close it. So we are at 63 responses out of 101 participants. I will just give it 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we can close. Thanks, Eugene. So quite nice to see that all of you are, looking at it from the same light. So it is more than 60% of the data breaches, which is actually caused by third parties. And the reason why it is because of a number of reasons. So if we look at this, why third parties affect privacy? So there were the traditional methods of how things were done. You would want to do business, and as part of how you do business, you would do it one-on-one. So you'd know directly who you're dealing with. It's a very controlled environment. Majority of the time, also, like, paper-based information really wasn't being transported all over. You'd keep it on site, or the most third party that you'd use is any of your off-site storage locations. So, very controlled. Again, very limited people in terms of who you'd have on your technical team, as well as your systems and providing support and systems. But as things get more complicated and as the world moves into digital transformation, you start seeing that business is happening everywhere. And this becomes the new way of doing business. So a few complexities introduced here. Firstly, yes, it happens everywhere. Secondly, you're now dealing with more than one stakeholder. So in the chain that you start seeing is that you now start introducing fourth parties. I was in one of the banking groups, and what we looked at is third-party risk management. And they said, okay, Candice, yeah, like these are third parties. There was one third party that came up particularly as being critical. That particular third party could not provide the services that the bank required on their own. They actually needed another party to fully come on board to provide those services. So it's that extension of liability. And yes, there's a number of things that you need to have in place, and we'll touch on a little bit of that a bit later. But you just start seeing that you have a third party who has a third party, and your information or your company's information has now been extended. So that's the one lens. The other lens is that everything happens all over. So now you have an element of information not only always residing in the country of origin. So in most instances, your information is now no longer residing in South Africa. where your information is residing. Sometimes you may not even know. So again, those all contribute to the angle of privacy. So yes, general third-party risk management risks, but it also comes and it also has a lens now from a privacy perspective. So we start now as privacy professionals start questioning to organizations, okay, who has access to your information? Do you know where your information is residing? Do you know what controls are being applied? And often you don't know the answers because what is your core that you're doing? You want to get done with your core business. So that's what you do. You bring a third party on board. The third party says they'll sort it out. Everything's done and things then operate as normal. As soon as you start taking the privacy lens on it, you're now seeing that there is this extension. So your information is now out there. It is in a number of places. And not only is it in a number of places and a number of hands, it may also be sitting in a different country location. So this just shows you that how the traditional way of doing business, which was a very single source, direct, I know where it's sitting, I know who's got it, I know who has access to it, those are the actual staff members that I can see it, has now completely changed. And I think an even further lens is, the time that we were shifted into, I think we were always going to move into this digital transformation age. I think COVID obviously forced us to do it a lot quicker. But what we see is that now that we've got this additional lens, you now have less control, or the control is sort of becoming a bit more, blur in terms of who has that access, where that access sits. And from a privacy perspective, that is of concern. And that's why third parties are seen in a new light. Like I said, if the trends are definitely changing, you can see more information regarding third parties. But if you look at privacy and when GDPR came live, and now with the coming of PAPIA, people are starting to look at it because the legislation, the regulation, as well as any of those other industry codes of conduct that you're looking at, or key requirements from those either industry body that they submit to you, they are also now putting this lens of third parties, privacy, how do you deal with information? And you have to start submitting more, and you have to start acknowledging more, and you have to start doing more. So that's for me the biggest part. Just going back to the poll, I think this is also why those data breaches have now started, coming out more, and adding to the results of data breaches. And it's scary to see. And those are obviously also only the ones that have been recorded and acknowledged, etc. But imagine the ones that also aren't. There's a number of instances where organizations, yes, it was maybe a minor breach because of a third party that hasn't been recorded yet. And a lot of the research which has been done has been from an international perspective. But exactly what you guys alluded to was 63% of data breaches are caused by third parties. So while 100% of the attacks are all on privileged accounts, because why would they be attacking the information if there wasn't a purpose in it for them? But looking at that, 63% is quite a high percentage. If we look at Ponimon, who's done a bit of research on data breaches, and you can go through the links through IBM, is that just the cost if a third party breach, if a breach is because of a third party, the attack increases by $370,000. Now, I know all of these amounts are in dollars, and we don't have the South African values yet. And I think when things start taking place after 1 July on our side, we'll start having stats on our own side. But I think just to see this on the international scale as well, in terms of how serious this is becoming, how scary it's also becoming. And also another key part is how 58% of organizations have no confidence that their third parties are securing and monitoring privileged access to their networks. So that's just looking at it from a network perspective, regardless of things that are being sent to third parties via email. So not sending anything securely, and they've now got it on their side, and they're not protecting it in any way. So I think it's now starting to come to light even more, and seeing this becomes even scarier. Now, we've seen the move in what companies are doing, how people are trying to get things in order. And I think for privacy, I like the light that it's shining on it. I like that things that we've been saying in terms of frameworks and contracts and doing due diligence is also coming through from a privacy perspective, so saying the same thing. But I think if you just look at these data breaches, and even if you had to go Google third-party data breaches, there's endless amounts that come up. One of the scary ones in IBM as well is the health industry, obviously within the US, which was specifically being targeted in terms of third-party breaches. Now that becomes even more scary if you think of your information that's out there. Now a third party had access to it and they've breached it. The thing that you also can't move away from when third-party data breaches happen is that as much as it is your third party and they would have, you know, been the cause of the breach, they would have been responsible, you as the organization, you as the responsible party, you as the controller of that information do not get to walk away and sort of say, okay, well, it was a third party data breach, so, you know, they in the light. You come into the light. You know, all of the angles and aspects that you would hear from any of the privacy talks that are happening, any of those conferences that you attend, is that damage that happens. So yes, there's the fines. Yes, there's a whole lot of things that happen when you know, if you're found to have been in breach, if you're acting unresponsibly, but the reputational damage and the trust that happens when a third-party data breach occurs, when a data breach occurs, is massive on you as a whole. Obviously, there is the responsibility that you share with the third party, but I think your name is still in the news. You're still at the forefront. You still have to put out the communication. You still have to make sure that your data subjects are aware of that data breach. So again, yes, data breaches have been around, but I think third-party data breaches adds a new lens. And then when we look at it from a privacy perspective, it adds another lens to it because you're now highlighted for a number of different reasons. So I think it's just, you know, making sure that, you know, you understand data breaches, you know, really go and read some of these reports to see that, you know, the scary facts that are coming to the forefront. And I think that alone could be a whole topic and a whole conversation on its own. How privacy has changed how organizations view and use third parties. So if I had a Liam Neeson voice, I would definitely try and do it in this voice. But any of you have seen any of the Taken movies, I don't care who you are or how bad our vendor management is, I will find you and I will audit you. So funny for me, really, you know, this is the movement. This is what is happening. We're seeing it on the rise. We saw it largely when you know, people started taking third-party risk management seriously, but I've seen it even more on the rise because of the privacy lens and the way that POPIA in South Africa, as well as GDPR for those companies that it applied to, I saw this being taken more seriously and a number of different things changing. So yes, third parties and the use of them are increasing. The risk is increasing, but the changes that you now see is that people are becoming more aware. So while the, you know, pulling third parties together, understanding who all third parties are still needs to mature, what is happening is contracts are definitely changing. So again, it's a privacy spin that I've seen on it, but, you know, making sure that there's some standard set of clauses within contracts. So right to audit, as much as some contracts may have had them pre-term, now it is definitely there with due diligence, etc. Breach notification is another 100% one that is there between organizations and third parties. You know, if termination of services had to occur at any point in time, making sure that any information about the organization is returned from that third party. So not becoming ignorant anymore of, okay, well, that relationship is terminated, that third party is out of my organization, I don't need to worry, but making sure that you get that information back. So we definitely seen an increase in that. Due diligence, whether happening from an onset and you see people doing it before any contracts are even been signed, and they're asking specific controls around privacy and information security, to the ongoing monitoring. So we definitely are seeing an increase in ongoing monitoring all the time, and people really having a view of understanding what does this landscape look like. Now, not always done for the full base, a lot of the times done for our high risk third parties, but I think to get to that high risk third party view, you sort of need to understand it. So if I had to say from my professional and personal perspective, how privacy has changed organizations' view and use of third parties, is that the increase of third parties will continue from an organizational perspective, but privacy is going to bring that lens of making sure people understand, okay, this is what my third-party landscape looks like. These are my high-risk third parties, whether you want to look at it holistically from an organization perspective, or if you want to say, okay, fine, I'm going to start small, I'm going to go from a privacy perspective to take that stock. And then the next step is then contracts. obviously for new contracts, I mean, for new third parties, it's easy to get that. But the changes in contracts is definitely happening from a privacy perspective, making sure that responsibility is shared, making sure that each party knows their responsibility, making sure those clauses are in there. So yes, the security and the privacy elements are becoming quite key. And then the due diligence from an onset, as well as then regular due diligence, and then that monitoring. So anything that, you know, third parties have promised from the beginning, they actually are then making sure that it is being done. Another angle of how privacy also changes a view of organizations, third parties, and the use of them is if you have to see privacy notices. So yes, you do not have to go and list every third party within your privacy notice that you are, you know, sharing information with, but it's a view of, you know, these are the types of third parties that information is being shared with. And again, it's because you as an organization have to be transparent with, you know, your users, your customers, your data subjects, if I can refer to them as that from a holistic perspective. So I don't think third parties are going to go away. I don't think, you know, any of us from a if we are all seen as third parties to our organizations will be out of jobs. I think that need will always continue, but I think how people view us as well is definitely going to change. What I saw in this as well is we were doing third-party risk management, general, not only from a privacy perspective for an organization, and we were requesting a third party of this organization to complete a security assessment. What happened was they completed it. They were like, okay, Candice, everything is fine, but now please can you get the organization to complete ours? So you can see that this is happening. You can see that it's an ongoing thing. It's evident that this is going to be this new way of work, of ongoing monitoring, ongoing answering of questions. And again, there's going to be a lot of it from a privacy perspective, especially, you know, us moving into this poppy world right now. The increase is there, and I think it's going to be around for a while as well. So how do we make sure that, you know, organizations can use third parties and not affect any business operations or privacy perspectives or privacy angles? Now, this is not a comprehensive list. This is also things that, you know, we have experienced. So we all want to get to everything is all over right now, or, you know, it's a bit of a muddle, and we want to get to something that's well oiled. It's, you know, in one go, and we can move forward and we can move swiftly. So if we have to look at some of the things from our experience, and that is really being key, is ensure there is accountability and ownership. So not only from a privacy third-party risk management perspective, but if you were just going broader on third-party risk management, make sure that there's this accountability and ownership. Know who's going to own this process within your organization, know where it stands, know who's going to be initiating stuff, who's it being driven from? Because, you know, if you have this, setting it up for the rest of the organization, whether there's a centralized or decentralized model, becomes extremely, extremely important. And we've seen, you know, where people have implemented third-party risk management principles, but they haven't had the accountability and the ownership, and that's where it sort of falls flat. So make sure that, you know, from the get-go, when you're making this happen within your organization, make sure that you have this accountability and this ownership. The next one is ensure correct governance is in place. So either you have a third-party strategy, a third-party policy, third-party processes. We've seen our third-party framework, and I mean, literally this framework is adaptable to your organization. And this just states from a third-party perspective, what are those principles that you are going to apply? And really you've got to consider both, because when we started putting these strategies, these policies, these processes in place, there's always two lenses that you need to look at it. You've got your existing third parties and you've got new third parties. New third parties, I think it's always easier to deal with. The existing is where all the complications come in. But if you understand what this landscape looks like and you start putting these governance processes to match the landscape, things become a lot easier. And make sure that within this landscape, you have a view of how do you make sure you identify all your third parties, or if a new third party is coming into your organization, what's the sort of trigger to make sure that they brought on and you have sight of them from a holistic perspective. Make sure you have some sort of classification, risk profiling to ensure that you can get to a high, medium, low. And I've got another point which a little bit later, which talks about, you know, don't try and tackle everything at once. Now, for organizations, especially our large financial organizations, we've seen that the number of third parties here can go into the thousands. It's reality. It's not us making jokes. It's not us trying to exaggerate anything, but we really have seen that, you know, if that is the numbers that you're working with, you need some sort of identification mechanism to break down what do these buckets look like. So some sort of way to get to your highs, mediums, lows, or if you go very high, medium, lows, but really to get to how do you take this from a risk-based approach. Then you've got you'll have your assessment portions, you'll go into some of reporting, and then really the management. And the management part becomes very important really for ongoing monitoring and how you would then view those third parties in the future. The next part, understand who your third parties are. In the framework, I touched on a little bit of identification. So really, I mean, a number of times we go into an organization and they just do not understand the full extent to who their third parties are. Even if they have a central procurement team, there are still third parties that slip through the cracks, and really consolidating this list. So having a central source of who third parties are is really try and key, and one of those steps to really make sure that you know the base that you're dealing with, and you know, from the existing, it's really, that's where the massive task comes up with. We've seen it that we could spend less time on actually doing assessments and more time on just getting to understand what does the full extent of third parties look like. So if you can find an easy way to really start identifying that and making sure that all third parties form part of that process, you know, getting your base is really quite key and will definitely help you guys. Don't try and tackle everything at once. So you definitely need to take a risk-based approach in this journey of privacy as well. And as you go through third-party risk management, what you'll see is that there's a few things that need to be done. Contracts need to be updated. You need to have some due diligence, especially of your high-risk third parties, and then you need to have your ongoing monitoring. You need to take a risk-based approach. You need to have a plan to say, this is what my landscape looks like. This is what I'm going to do. You need to have your buckets of high, mediums, lows, and then you need to say, okay, what you're going to do with those. From a contract perspective, you're going to have another lens which comes in from existing as to how do you update, how do you go about all of those. So don't try and tackle everything at once, but I think take stock of what you have, what needs to be done, and then put your plan out in terms of how you are actually going to do it. Look at automated solutions, especially if you're going to be doing anything which has to do with assessments. The rise in assessments has just become so much. To have Excel sheets flying around, I think, yeah, pre-2016, that's where you'd probably use it, because you weren't doing a lot of these assessments. But these assessments, especially where you have big groups of third parties, don't try and do Excel spreadsheets. You know, third parties, especially if you're going to be monitoring them on an ongoing basis, if they want to refer to previous results, you want to do this in a way that is the most efficient and one that's going to get you the most out of it with the least amount of work. So really try and look at those automated solutions which are out there, and they really are, you know, they really are becoming quite key and really useful in the organization. If you are running assessments or due diligence or whatever you want, control assessments, whatever you want to call it, you know, think of yourself if you had to complete that assessment. You know, we often want to get the most amount of information, and sometimes regulatory pressures do put that on us to make sure that we're getting so much. But don't make your questionnaires lengthy, because you just lose anybody. I would go, you know, maximum around the 40 question mark if you're wanting to do a due diligence or control assessment or a risk assessment. 40 questions, because, you know, that really is sufficient for everything that you need. And try combine all your questions. So don't send different types of assessments. Obviously you'll have different requirements at different points in time, but if you're looking at this from a privacy and from an organizational perspective, try and get one holistic view and make sure that your questions are not too lengthy. And then make sure that there's close integration with other third-party management processes. So like I said, sourcing and selection, or your onboarding, or even the contract management, make sure that it's part of it. Any of your procurement processes, start it from the get-go. Yes, from existing, it's going to change a little bit and you've got a bit of work to do. But if you're going to look at it from, starting new third parties, make sure that it's embedded into your process. Make sure that you sort of risk rate them, you get what they are, high, medium, low, you get them the necessary control assessment, and that, it's triggered from procurement. It's triggered from the time you are going to onboard this third party, because it makes your life a lot easier. Define key indicators with third parties. So what are your expectations, and make sure that those are definitely documented and something that you can do from a monitoring perspective. And then lastly, just monitor and report remediation progress of your third parties. And that really goes to the framework step that closes everything out, is that ongoing management, that ongoing reporting. So it does seem like tedious tasks in terms of what needs to be done. Pulling all of this together can be like, okay, Candice, like, what are you possibly saying? Are these all the things that I need to do? And, it's another lens. And when we go into organizations and whether we're introducing it from a privacy perspective or whether we are introducing it just from a general third-party risk management, a lot of people say that, guys, like, is this everything that I now need to do over and above my day job? Or you'll see that some of the stakeholders will be like, okay, this is what I look after. Am I supposed to now do this as well? And how do I monitor all these assessments coming through? And that's why making sure that you tackle it in small forces is definitely going to be key. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I know that the chat functionality is buzzing. So let me just have a look. Khabo, I'm not sure if you want to, if you've looked at some of the questions already and you want to field some, or if I can go. Okay,
Yes,
cool.
I have. Okay, thank you very much, Candice. Let's go to the question. So why am I not losing my first question? Okay, pardon me. So I think there was a first comment from Hendrik, or question. If you have a business that is conducting business with a European company and have a third party who processes the European data. What? Okay, Hendrik. Okay, so you have a business conducting business with a European company and you have a third party who processes the European data, right? Now, if you have a data breach with third party, who would be liable for the fine under the GDPR and POPIA?
Okay, so if you have a business that is conducting business with a European company and you now have a third party who processes it, so it also depends. So again, now when third party relationships are starting to be formed, etc., in general instances, if the third party was found to be completely negligent, you followed all of your procedures, your protocols for how information was shared, you've acted responsibility, and the third party, the breach completely happened on the third party side, the third party will be liable. But like I said, the other part that always constitutes as part of that is that your business will still be in the light. The reputational damages that come from it, etc., are all still from you. So it all goes down when we look at like the data breaches and being fined for particular breaches. And this is really going to the fine perspective that we start looking at if you've acted negligently. So if you look at any of the fines, more so from the international perspective, because that's the ones that have been fined specifically, you'll see that they were found to be acting negligently, and that's the reason for the fine. So in this instance, if it was a fine specifically, and you've done everything from your business perspective, and it was completely found on the third party side to be acting negligently, they would be responsible for the fine. But I think the reputational damage would definitely be on both sides.
Yeah, I think also on the question of would you be liable under GDPR or POPIA, I think it will depend on where the breach is. But I know, with European companies, they obviously want you to comply with GDPR, and equally South African companies, if you are taking the data outside of South Africa or the information outside of South Africa, you need to make sure that whoever is handling your information complies, because ultimately you will be held accountable.
No, 100%, Khabo. And I think, Obviously, the applicability of GDPR needs to be looked at. So it obviously you unpack a lot of instances with just that question alone, and how are you processing EU citizen information? Are you directly selling to them, etc.? So it has a lot of lenses that you do look at it from. But I think if you are, and you have to act in accordance with GDPR, it does apply to you. Those companies and those countries are specifically doing checks all the time. And if you're going to come out and they are using you for something, and you are a third party of theirs, and the breach happened on your side, they're going to, they're so quick on these fines right now because they become so mature in this world, that they'll see it, and they're constantly doing those monitorings to make sure that people across the world are taking it seriously, because they've really taken that stance. And I think they've been one of the leaders really that people have looked to from a privacy perspective, and they've been quite serious in terms of when it comes to fines.
Okay, thank you. Sequela says we have vendors and representing them in SA imposes GDPR on us. Yeah, no, that is correct. Now, a question from Annette is, are IoT devices that are provided by risky providers an extension of fourth-party unknowns?
Internet of Things devices that are provided by risky providers, an extension of fourth-party unknown. So definitely, yes, Annette, I would say they are. And I think, those, when those are being brought in, it's really to understand. The other thing, when fourth parties, whether they're providing products, whether they're providing your Internet of Things, whatever they're providing, services, devices, etc., is always being open and transparent with the organization before they can actually do it. That is actually a requirement under our privacy legislations and regulations that we look at. And definitely it is a fourth party extension, but there's ways that needs to be done, and again, controls that need to be put in place to make sure before it is actually done on that front.
Okay, thank you, Candice. Such great information. That's Nolene Williamson. Diego says, I think enforcement of papaya will increase value of data breaches from threat actors' perspective, and you might see increased attempts of data of breaches. Is it lawful to pay ransom to criminals? Yeah.
I'm going to say no, but obviously I think the bill and everything speaks a lot more about those things, and that's why, your first thing is like, oh my goodness, my information, I don't want to be out in the news, I'm going to just pay it, etc. I think it's going to be kept quiet. Guys, not the way to go. Really, get your right stakeholders involved, make sure that you have those processes to cater. And that's why those incident simulations, because this is going to become reality. Those incident simulations in terms of, this does happen and I'm now forced to pay ransom. What do I do? To make people aware, especially your incident response teams, as this comes to light even more now, it's becoming more prevalent that these need to happen, and you need to equip resources, because first reaction is to, okay, I don't want to be in the media, I'm going to pay it, I'm going to do what I need to do. Not the way to go, guys. Really, you need to communicate internally, make sure you get the right people on board, and then take it from there. Whether, the breach then happens and now you've been found, etc., you'd rather go that way instead of saying, okay, now to criminals we've actually paid, because I think the repercussions could also be quite serious on that front.
Yes, I think I always get asked that question as well a lot when I do privacy consulting. And the thing is, you need to kind of have your answers right, because if you do pay the ransom, you can be found to be an accomplice. If you don't have your facts straight, you might be accused of yourself being accomplice, because remember, there is a criminal act that is happening, and if it's a crime, it needs to be reported. And if you don't, if it's a data breach, it's a different story. I'm just thinking, if, for instance, it's a kidnapping or something like that, and you want to, obviously, if it's a data breach, it's you trying to protect your assets, and in case of crime of a personal nature, you're trying to protect your family. But it's that question of the right thing to do or the lawful thing to do. But you might find yourself in trouble being, helping criminals, basically. So you do want to get the law enforcement involved, and they will guide you as to what needs to be done. I think, like Candice said, get all the right people involved. Well, that is why it's very important to have those simulations done so that everybody knows what needs to be done when this does happen. Because I think, like a security breach, these breaches are just waiting to happen to you. You know, the extent to which they will happen is something else, but they will happen at some stage. So you need to be ready. Vincent said you can outsource a service but not accountability. 100% correct, Vincent. Accountability lies with you. If the service provider drops the ball, the main organization must account to the shareholders. True. Governance 101, Shadow IT, Steven places. Annette said, this is great, Candice. Every company, big and small, need to have their CISO in place or a specific person assigned. Correct, I agree with you. And Tabi saying accountability and ownership is critical. Yes, I think, you know, the common theme is, you know, you need to be accountable. And it's very common to find when you do third-party risk assessments, to find that, you know, most organizations, they think, okay, this is not our core company, we've outsourced, and therefore just abdicate accountability. No, that's not it. It's still your business, it's still your operations. You just have someone doing it on your behalf, so you need to be accountable.
100%.
So I think Ntabi saying is responding to the GDPR POPIA jurisdiction, GDPR because of EU data that is breached. Yeah, that is true. Okay, so Charity says, is that defined in POPIA that as a company, if we did all we could, and if a third party was negligent, then it's third party with fault?
So I mean, POPI doesn't specifically say any of those items, but where we obviously have looked for guidance. So that is where we're now following from an international perspective. When we are now starting to implement and our codes of conduct are starting to come out, we're definitely going to see more of those and would be able to say specifically what POPIA says. But that has been what we followed from the guidance, especially from the GDPR perspective, and how it has been dealt with. Any of the breaches as well is that, you know, it's when you've been negligent, and if people have been fined, it's the negligent part that is definitely there.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so thank you. They were a great presentation. A big hello from Italy. Oh, I have to leave for another call. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Lordana from Italy? Thank you so much. And I know Annette as well is joining us from Melbourne. Thank you so much for joining us. Carl says, when organizations engage this journey, would you advise starting a third-party contract level? Or would you advise starting at a third-party contract level or at a technology asset landscape level in assessing or gauging the extent of privacy risk landscape?
So I would go at the third-party contract level, and the reason for this is that you don't want to miss anything. I think we always think privacy and personal information is always the electronic landscape. I think, you know, where you're trying to do it from that contract perspective and really just understanding what is that impact going to be. I would go broader. I wouldn't only do it from a technology asset landscape, whereas at the third party contract level, you're contracting the services. So you're really starting to understand from the get-go what this third party is going to be providing, and then you can see the extent to, you know, where information is going to be. So if you're looking at it specifically from a privacy landscape, or if you want to look at it a bit broader, so I would definitely start at the third party contract level.
Okay, so there's another one from Tebello. It says, how do you go about doing a due diligence background checks with cloud service providers, considering that they require you as the customer to comply with their requirements as opposed to them satisfying your requirements?
So I think they are moving a lot away from it.
Yes.
So I know, you know, it's something that they're now starting to have to comply with. I think even not only our cloud providers, I think if we look at our big organizations, our Microsofts, etc., like especially when we've started trying to send them our security risk assessments or our control assessments from a third party perspective, one of two things sort of starts happening. They either refer you to their certifications, which does suffice. Because if they've got the ISO 27001 certified, they are if they are in the payment card industry and they've got PCI certifications, or you start looking at their accreditations, you start becoming more comfortable. So you may not need to do a full-on assessment. If they are completely not, satisfying, there are certain requirements, and that's where you've got to see your make or break. But you have to understand, at least from the onset, especially cloud service providers, where that information is going to. You need to understand the country that information is going to reside in, because from a control perspective, you need to be aware that, okay, how this country and the laws that they provide from a privacy landscape would be the same as for how South Africa is now going to protect that information. So while they may not comply with all of your requirements, I think the key things that you'd want to do is to make sure that you know where the information is going and you know what controls they are going to be applying. So if they've got their standards, I think especially here when we look more like our international companies, they may have a lot more in place as South Africa is more maturing in this space. But I think that's where you've got to do that. You've got to take stock as to, okay, where's the information going? Is it in another country? What controls do you have in place? And then do the comparison as to what would you still require from them. If the only thing that you would still be requiring from them is like a monitoring or due diligence, then you've got to see how do you work around it to get information from them on a yearly basis that you don't do an actual audit or conduct an assessment. You've got to take stock as to what are they saying they're going to give and what are you having to comply with, versus they are processing your information. They are acting on behalf of you. So there are certain things that you need to ask for. And as third parties, as service providers, as vendors, there's certain things to meet those requirements. But then the other one is to also look at what other controls or certifications can they provide to you as another plus that you could also rely on. There's a framework question. I did see it as well. So I think it was around what frameworks can you use to do third-party assessments. So it really does depend on what lens you are doing a third-party assessment from. We've seen various types of assessments. So if you're looking at it specifically from a security lens, you'd look at your ISOs, you'd look at your NISTs. If you're looking at it broader and you have privacy, obviously there's no set of questions, but you could take any of the best practices. I mean, ISACA's got some questions around privacy and some tools. NIMITY's got their framework and you could pull some questions from there. So it really depends on what lens you want to ask your assessment from. And then you'd be able to say, okay, fine, how do you pull the different questions? So we don't use one set framework or standard, we use multiple ones, and it really depends on the need and the nature of the type of assessment that you want to go out. We've also seen a lot of now, like, your anti-money laundering and your financial crimes and all of those becoming very key in terms of assessments. So some people have a very operational and company focus where you want to get BE information, you want to do your AML checks, you want to do all of that. So it really depends on the lens that you want to have the assessment from. So I wouldn't say that there's one framework that you'd only, I'd say that there are multiple frameworks and standards, as well as our other legislation and industry body codes of conduct that you'd also bring in to make sure that you get the best fit for an assessment.
Excellent, thank you. I think, in terms of, just wanting to know, if you look at your POPI, for instance, for going to the question of, where the data is, there are, I think it's section 72, where it deals with the data, the data subjects right, and also what you need to do into what the requirements are in terms of exporting of data. So, you need to understand where your cloud providers are taking the information, and therefore are they complying with POPI.
100%.
And I think there was a question, I think you just answered it, which is which standard or framework would be recommended for assessment of third parties. It was from Bongi, but I think yes, you dealt with that. I think also on the ISACA as well does provide you with a third-party risk assessment. So you can check if you check on the ISACA website, if you are a member. If you are not, please join us. You have all this information available to you on the ISACA website. Thank you very much. I think we have come to the end of our session. Thank you for all your participation. This really was a truly participative session. I would like to thank everyone who took the time to participate. So I'm going to just share my screen for the closing part, I think I would like everyone to join me in thanking our two speakers, Tebello and Candice. Really appreciate your feedback. We have posted the link. Sorry, hang on. I like to see people when I'm talking to them. We have posted the link for our for the evaluation forms. Please take time to complete that. And now for the most exciting part of this evening, the other very exciting part of the evening is, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Right, so for the exciting part, the mystery prizes, I know some people have been waiting for this, and I'm glad to see that we still have a strong 90 people online. So we have two winners. The first winner is the person who got the closest to get the answers from Tebello's icebreaker. And we have the second winner, who is someone who's been very participative, quality participation in the chat. And I would like us to put our hands together for our two winners. And they are Ramaisela Makongo and Sekwela Mokhala. Well done to you too. You will get your prizes from the office, from Eugene in the office. Thank you so much for participating. I really want to thank everyone. Today was a very interactive session. I really like that. I think we need more of these interactions, and we need to ask questions. If you have any further questions, either for any of the speakers that were here tonight, please just drop us an email, or you can drop them an email. They did leave their contact details. And also, this is going to be posted on our YouTube video, so you can see that. You can still have their contact details there. Unfortunately, Tebello had to leave to go to another session. As I said, she is a speaker, global speaker, so she had to leave. So thank you very much, Candice. Once again, please don't forget our virtual conference and the workshops that are coming before and after the conference. And we also still have opportunities for you to become a sponsor. So please do get in touch with our office for that. And that would be the end of tonight. Thank you very much, everyone. I really do appreciate that I know we've run a little over time, and I do apologize for that. But thank you for your participation. I hope you have really gained from this session as much as I did. It's good. I always like to learn something new every time, and today was definitely one of those days. And I hope each and every one of you also learned something today. And I wish you well, and please stay safe. We still have COVID amongst us. It's not gone yet. I would like to just say thank you, and go well. And we'll hope to see you in our next forum, which will be in June, I believe. But do be on the lookout for the other professional forums in the other regions, as we run them every month. So thank you, everyone. With that, I'm going to say goodbye.